Holdsworth, Managing Director, Clean Energy and Environmental Policy at the Edison Electric Institute, or EEI. EEI is a trade association that represents investor-owned or privately held electric companies in the United States. Our members have reduced their emissions 36% below 2005 levels as of last year. We're currently deploying 40% of the nation's electricity coming from zero-emitting sources. We're leading the world in reducing carbon, and we're really proud today to be at this event to talk about a critical technology for getting us to the road to net zero, and that's long-duration energy storage. What we want to do today is talk a little bit about a partnership that was formed earlier this year with EEI, the Electric Power Research Institute, the Long Duration Energy Storage Council, and the Department of Energy to help identify and overcome the barriers to ensure widespread deployment of long-duration energy storage. And as we've heard at the meetings today, the call, and here at the COP, the call for the tripling of renewable energy certainly now highlights the importance of having viable long-duration energy storage to ensure that electricity remains affordable and reliable and resilient. We're going to be talking about our partnership here today, but we're also talking about more broadly the important role of long-duration energy storage, or LDES, in helping us to get to net zero. We also want to talk a little about the opportunities that the recent legislation of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act offer in the United States to deploy more than potentially 500 gigawatts of long-duration energy storage by 2050, resulting in billions of dollars of savings for customers. But even more importantly, those developments in the United States can help translate that technology overseas and help the world take advantage of long-duration energy storage. We'll talk a little bit about federal policies and how those are helping, and we'll talk about the partnership and what we're trying to do to engage key stakeholders to overcome the roadblocks to long-duration energy storage deployment. We've got a great set of speakers today, and it's only my pleasure right now to introduce our first speaker, our keynote speaker, Julia Sekira, the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary, Office of International Affairs at the Department of Energy. Julia most recently served prior to DOE as the Executive Director of the U.S. Climate Alliance. It's a bipartisan coalition of governors working together themselves to advance ambitious state agendas in the nation's history. Julia's had a long role in the development and public policy area in the climate space and in advancing clean energy technology. And rather than have me ramble on, I think we'd more rather hear from Julia on the role of the federal government and federal policies in helping advance long-duration energy storage. So please join me in welcoming Julia to the stage.
All right, good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. So this is just a terrific opportunity for us to talk about our partnership. We're so glad to be working with EEI, with EPRI, and also the LDES Council to really elevate LDES and the need for commercialization, not just domestically to meet our climate goals, but also to think through the ways that our investments are going to have global benefits. So globally, the power sector is responsible for roughly 40%, right, of all energy-related CO2 emissions. And we're also seeing that we're expecting there to be a significant increase in the capacity of renewables that's coming online. So the IEA projects it'll be about 80% increase by 2030. So as we're thinking about how we're going to introduce more renewables onto the market and onto the grid, what that means in terms of variability, obviously in order to have the flexibility that the grid needs, LDES is going to have to be a key part of that solution set. We've had numerous conversations with industry and other government partners, and everybody keeps coming back to the fact that our grid modernization, long-duration storage are going to continue to be constraints in the market as people are deploying more and more renewables and trying to figure out how can they actually connect it into these grids. The complications around grid modernization are significant. In the US, it's multi-stakeholder, significant investments, and we see the same for partners all around the world. So we're really investing big on LDES. We have numerous multilateral partnerships, bilateral partnerships, and we're making major investments domestically. One thing that I wanted to flag for the group is DOE has developed a series of reports called Liftoff reports. You can find them at liftoff.energy.gov. I would definitely suggest taking a look at these. The reports were developed through numerous consultations with the private sector, with government actors, financiers, to figure out what is actually the pathway for commercial liftoff for a series of technologies, including LDES. And when we're talking about commercial liftoff, it's really thinking about what is that threshold at which so the industry and some of these technologies become sustainable such that you actually don't need major public investments going into those technologies, but the technology is at a point in its maturity where you have capital investments that are coming in from the private sector and that they're able to absorb those risks. So I mention this because one of the recent the LDES liftoff report that we released showed that the U.S. grid is going to need 225 to 460 gigawatts of LDES by 2050 at a cost of about $330 billion in capital in that time frame. That is massive, right? It also found that there's three major constraints that we need to be able to work with partners on in order to address. So the first is improvements in technology performance and cost curves. The second is market and regulatory mechanisms, and the third is supply chain development and planning. So those are going to be the immediate and near-term items that we need to focus on in order to get commercial liftoff of these technologies. And so that's why the partnerships that we've established through this MRU are going to be so critical to doing that. So what is it that we are doing as an administration? As you know, we've got very ambitious climate goals under the Biden-Harris administration, including net zero by 2050. And so as part of that, the landmark legislation through bill and IRA has just given us the resources that we really need in order to accomplish some of these goals. It is not only like a landmark investment, but probably a once-in-a-generation investment in our infrastructure and technology. And so we are ramping up as fast as possible to get that money out the door and make sure that those investments count. One of the things that we've been doing is called the Energy Earthshots. I'm not sure if folks are familiar with it, but it's this amazing program where we've basically identified 8 critical technologies that are needed to get to 2050. And what we've done is pull together our researchers and SMEs, our partnerships, working with academic institutions, private sector, as a way of focusing the department's efforts around these 8 critical technologies. And LDES is one of those 8 that we've announced. For those of you who are government partners, we're looking at how to internationalize those so that we can be sharing our lessons as we're making these investments in these technologies. Feel free to grab me afterwards if you're interested in exploring that. But the LDES shot is intended to reduce the cost of grid-scale storage by 90% by 2030 for systems that are delivering 10+ hours of duration. And so that's the focus of our effort. And so we're tracking progress actively towards those goals to make sure that we stay on track. We also have 60 new DOE programs on energy storage. So it's $505 million in LDES demonstration programs, $10 billion for grid infrastructure programs, and we're also creating real pathways to achieve commercialization for these critical technologies. This past September, our Office of Clean Energy Demonstrations announced $325 million for 15 projects that would fund a range of technologies to overcome the technical and the institutional barriers for full-scale deployment of LDES. That's going to prioritize adoption as well as trying to really focus on the economic and environmental benefits that would be accrued to our local communities. So just to kind of close out sort of these opening remarks, as you know, we recently signed an MOU with the organizations that are going to be on today's panel. And it's part of that is because we know that the government actions aren't going to be alone. We're making major investments, but it's a fraction of what we need to do to actually get to our goals. And that's why these partnerships are so important. The MOU is going to help us develop manufacturing of energy storage technologies. It's going to help us meet the growing market demands. It's always going to help us elevate the importance of LDES, increase the understanding around the technological, economic, and resilience benefits, and will allow us to convene some of the stakeholders that we need to pull together in order to really think about what are the actionable solutions to get these technologies to scale. Part of the challenge that we see is that we really need to develop some trust with our partners, with regulators, and so again, the partnership that we have with the organizations today is going to help us do that. I think as we look forward to how we're going to work with the MOU partners, there's going to be an inaugural LDES Industry Summit in 2024, which is going to be a great opportunity for us to share insights with partners and with industry. I hope that you all will participate. We look forward to being there. And so just want to thank you for what we're going to hear from the panelists today and also for your interest in the technology. Thank you so much.
the stage, and we'll go ahead and get into our panel conversation. And again, I want to thank Julie for those really inspiring opening remarks and talking about the role of the federal government, and obviously one of the key partners in this whole initiative, right? The lift of the government is tremendous, but really happy to be joined now in conversation by representatives of the partnership. So in no particular order, we have Brian Wolf, our Chief Strategy Officer, Executive Vice President of EEI, Katie Heriza, Vice President, Corporate Affairs at EPRI, Gabe Murtaugh, the Director of Markets and Technology at the Long Duration Energy Storage Council, and Massimiliano Massi, the General Manager of Magaldi, which is a thermal energy storage company, and so playing a key role sort of in the technology development and deployment side of the spectrum. And thank you all, again, for being here and being a part of the partnership. And so just maybe to kick things off, I'm wondering, Gabe, maybe turn to you, since you're with the Long Duration Energy Storage Council, and this is a Long Duration Energy Storage Partnership. But could you talk a little bit about the council and really also the role that long duration energy storage can and needs to play? And again, right, this now in the context of a call for a tripling of renewable energy by 2030. So Gabe, to you, thanks.
Yeah, I think Julie really teed this conversation up well. Long duration energy storage is incredibly important, and we're going to need it very, very soon. I think hopefully everybody in the audience here knows that, when you first start to decarbonize and you get that first megawatt of solar or wind on the system, whenever it's generating, it's directly displacing traditional generation. So you're decarbonizing just by virtue of having those renewables in the system. Today, most of the grids in the U.S. are at a point where renewable penetration is such that the renewables aren't as effective as they once were. You've got so much solar during the middle part of the day that you've got more than can potentially meet demand during certain times of the day. You've got wind generation that's overloading transmission lines, so you need either more transmission and you potentially need to move that generation to other times of the day to consume it. And storage resources are obviously a solution for that. And long duration storage is even more critical as you decarbonize further and further. So early on in the process, you can get by with some shorter duration storage resources, like 4-hour duration lithium-ion batteries, even shorter duration 2-hour lithium-ion batteries. But as you get further along that decarbonization curve, and as we get closer and closer to 2050, which I know a lot of people here at this meeting have been talking about goals in 2030, 2035, and we think, my God, 2030 is right around the corner. But if we're decarbonizing the entire grid, 2050 is really right around the corner too, and we need to start working on that right away. So long duration is going to have to be part of that solution. There's going to be very, very big numbers, and to move the technology far enough along the development curve, we've got to start doing that right now. So we really applaud the actions that we put together in this MOU. We applaud the efforts from the DOE, and we're looking forward to this work. But long road ahead of us.
Well, Gabe, just to come back to you real quick in an unscripted question, is there just one flavor of long duration energy storage? How many flavors are there? Where are we on that curve?
So there are a lot of different flavors of long duration energy storage. So we're a member-led organization. We've got 70 members. More than half of those members are technology members. So those are actually companies that are developing long duration energy storage solutions. Those solutions come in 4 different buckets. There's thermal storage, there's chemical storage. These are storage solutions that have, they're kind of like a Swiss Army knife. They serve multiple purposes. When you're thinking about chemical solution, green hydrogen or any hydrogen certainly falls into that category. So you've got a chemical that can be used to produce energy or something else. The thermal solution, same thing. They turn electricity into heat, and then you can use that heat for other applications, obviously industrial applications, manufacturing, that sort of thing. There's also electrochemical batteries. These are kind of, we like to say it's jokingly that it's every combination of chemicals or materials on the periodic table, and that's about what it is. And then obviously there's mechanical long duration energy storage, and mechanical's been around for a very long time. Those are some proven technologies, but there's also some new technologies. So things like pumped hydro, compressed air, they fall into that bucket, which have been around for 100+ years. But there's new twists and new takes on those technologies that we're planning to develop, and companies are developing. And those are the companies we expect to lift off and really take off and see some downward pressure on the cost curves as they expand in terms of how technologically developed they are.
I appreciate you kind of painting that broader picture, right? Much like hydrogen, many different forms, many different opportunities. Katie, let me bring you in on this conversation. Can you tell us a little bit about EPRI? Obviously, it's a research institute. What you're doing in this area, and maybe also if you can pick up on Gabe's last point and what you're seeing in long duration energy storage development.
Sure, happy to do that. So, first, thank you for inviting us to be here, and thanks to all of you for coming. I know this is getting to the tail end of the session, so we really appreciate you taking the time. So, the energy storage space is made up of many players, many roles, and many perspectives, all contributing to advancing and developing the technologies. And so EPRI, as an independent research organization, takes an objective and inclusive approach to look across and collect ideas from across the global energy ecosystem so that we can advance the state of the art as fast as humanly possible, because we all know that we can never move fast enough. And so, but first, we must have a vision of the future and a roadmap on how to get there. And so in 2020, we launched a multi-stakeholder effort in which to do just that. And so we created a vision to path to 2025 where energy storage enhances safe, reliable, affordable, and environmentally responsible electric power. And so this roadmap serves as a guide for EPRI's energy research activities, including industry and government collaboration. And so we use this knowledge to inform the collaborative that we have formed here today. And our path forward includes lowering costs and increasing efficiency of energy storage in its various forms to make it easier to capture, store, and release clean energy when energy generation is unavailable. So I heard from Julie the enormous amount of storage, LDES, that we're going to need. I'll throw out a global number. 8 terawatts is projected to be needed by 2030 globally. So that's a massive number. So to catalyze the scale of deployment, EPRI is sharing real-world learnings through partnerships with EEI, DOE, such as the DOE's LDES Storage Shot, the LDES Council, and other programs aimed at accelerating the deployment of LDES technologies. So new technologies must be tested and evaluated at scale to increase understanding of how they work, their limitations, overall costs, and benefits, to earn industry, regulator, and public trust in energy storage that performance is repeatable and cost-effective. So EPRI's planning studies have evaluated various decarbonization and technology cost scenarios. The findings showed a portfolio of the many flavors of technologies will be needed as the grid transitions to higher intermittent resource penetration. So EPRI is tracking about 150 technologies in this space and growing. So thank you. I'll turn it back to you.
Wow, 8 terawatts. That, much like everything here in Dubai and at this COP, that's at a massive scale of things that are going to be needed. So I appreciate you sharing that. And one thing I didn't mention at the introduction, right? Not only did the 4 organizations form this partnership, but subsequently signed an MOU, a memorandum of understanding, to enshrine the roles of each of the partners. And Brian, let me turn to you. EEI earlier this year formed the Institute for the Energy Transition, which is kind of helping lead the IOU effort in this space. And wondering if you could tell us a little about the Institute itself and how it's getting involved in this long-duration storage energy area.
Sure. Thanks, Eric. I'm going to ping a little bit off of what Julia said because I found very interesting that our partner at DOE is really looking through the liftoff documents that you mentioned, a very similar approach to what we're doing. We partnered and brought McKinsey on board because we really wanted to look at all the technologies, all the advanced technologies that Bill and Ira and others enabling for us to really to commercialize and bring to market. And I think that what we really needed to think about was what's needed. And I think that's what the MOU and all of us, especially our research partner in EPRI as well, and the LDES Council, I think we had to really step back and evaluate these technologies and think about the infrastructure that's required, what it is to be able to think about the maturation of these technologies over time, but to also look at them economically. And I wanted to pick up because Julia, you said the word, but we've really got to be prepared with our commissions. We represent over 260 million customers, and we really have to be prepared with our regulators and the general public. So we've got a lot of education to do. I think the MOU sets that out well for us all to be out there educating stakeholders and others. But I put commissions in that too, Julia, because they're the ones that are either going to approve or deny, our ability to really accelerate, a lot of these technologies. But potentially, really, LDES has so much potential that you all are speaking of, but we really have to be pointing a lot of resources in that direction.
I appreciate that, Brian, and I'll bring Massimiliano in just a second. But before we dive that, I want to just hit the three partners real quick and ask why each of your organizations got into this partnership. Why are you involved in this, and why does it matter to you? So maybe we'll just go back to Gabe and Katie and then Brian, and then I'll bring you in, Massimiliano.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious. Name of the organization, LDES Council. We're focused on our members. We believe in, and we were born out of the Global Renewables Alliance. So we are driving towards decarbonization, and that's a core tenet of the organization. And we know that we can't do that without long duration energy storage. So what it's imperative that we do is think about how we can deploy these resources. Obviously, cost is a big part of that. So how do we move these things down the cost curve and do that in a very expeditious manner, because we are so short on time if we want to meet some of these goals.
So at EPRI, collaboration is at the heart of what we do. And so we've been doing this for 50 plus years. And so we've seen energy transitions before, and we know that together, and only together, can we actually scale and accelerate the deployment in the manner that we need to. And so, and through collaboration, we're able to cost share and leverage resources and ideas. So we think that it's critically important to be a part of this great
Brian?
partnership.
Yeah, we had 6 EEI member companies that were a part of the LDES Demonstration Awards that DOE put out. That really helped jumpstart our companies because, what do you say, Eric? We probably have 60 domestic companies that represent that 260 million customers. But we have to be in the business of replication for those, because that's what our companies do. They look to each other, say, the how-to, especially on a new technology. And those demonstration awards really are going to enable us to just push a little bit harder, a little bit faster. I think Julia talked about the acceleration of all this and the massive scale that it's on, but also it's just a fraction of what we need. So we're looking at the public-private partnerships that we actually need further out there in our communities to be able to demonstrate and excel these technologies.
Well, thanks, Brian. Let's bring Massimiliano in. You're actually out there with technologies, developing things, deploying things. I know your organization works a lot in the sort of thermal storage area. Could you tell us a little about your company and the markets you operate in and what you're seeing in the world of long-duration storage?
Absolutely. Thank you, and thank you for having us this very interesting session. So Magaldi is a company that has almost 90 years of history. So it's an historical Italian company, very strong in R&D manufacturing. We are the worldwide leader in hot temperatures conveyors. So our background and our core capability is to manage industrial situation in which we have 700, 800 degrees Celsius to handle efficiently. So 12 years ago, the founder, Mr. Mario Magaldi, he decided to go into renewables because he said the future is renewable. I want to use my core capabilities in hot temperatures to create something able to store heat efficiently and release steam. So the idea is to use sand, silica sand, ordinary sand, use electricity as a charge, so power, transform it into heat, store this heat very efficiently in the sand, and then release green steam to the industrial sectors. We operate between 150, 500 degrees. So we are not covering the hard-to-abate industries. We are covering food industries, tobacco industries, pulp and paper, all chemicals, everything that is below 500. And I mean, the technology was completely overlooked up to 2 years ago. We joined LDS 2 years ago, as we are, say, almost co-founders. And the awareness about using electricity to transform it into steam is something that is taking place now, because for 250 years, the idea was to use steam to produce electricity. And if you talk with electrical engineers, it was like crazy to do the reverse way. But now, because of the incredible expansion of renewables, there will be curtailments, there will be opportunities to access to very cheap electricity. There will be competition among different technologies that will try to use this electricity to produce something different. We want to produce steam and decarbonize the industrial sector. And the US is probably, in our idea, the largest market. We had, in November, a webinar with EPRI. There were 50 utilities connected to it, US utilities. Utilities are definitely going into the business of decarbonization. They are not selling only electricity, they need to sell also decarbonization services, and they need, luckily for us, thermal storage. So that's our positioning. And other markets, of course, the Middle East, this is a huge market, Australia, and Europe, of course.
I just want to come back to you real quick on that. So Gabe talked about some of the different flavors of LDES technology out there. You've just talked about currently the role that thermal storage and your products are playing in hard-to-abate sectors. Do you think that's the only place for your technology? Are there other opportunities? And can you talk just a little bit more? You just mentioned 10 months worth of storage. Is that something you're able to deliver or something you're working towards? And how is that kind of revolutionizing some of the equation? That sounds pretty amazing.
Well, in terms of, let's say, different flavors, we can say thermal storage is very flexible. I mean, we talk about energy. Energy, by definition, needs to be transformed. Energy transforms itself, so we can use not only electricity, but also heat as an input. So going forward, we can have, if we are able to recover efficiently heat, we can use this heat to be transformed back into electricity. And even if the efficiency is not huge, because we will have a power block in like 30% efficiency, if we recover free heat and free electricity, this electricity will be basically almost free. And this is also consistent with the objective of the OE to go down to 90% in terms of cost of storage. In terms of duration, months is the dream, is the holy grail. We are starting with days, it will become weeks, and of course we need to combine in series and parallel different modules to get to the monthly storage duration. But this is achievable. I think by 2040, 2050, the world will be running on a completely different framework.
Well, that's really inspiring. And you know, even days is a pretty far development when many companies are still talking 2 hours and 4 hours of storage. And so maybe, Gabe, if I can turn to you, you talked about, you know, kind of the broad area and what's out there. What do you think it's going to take to really get LDES to penetrate into the market? What are what's holding LDES back from going farther, especially now when we're seeing some of these developments about days long and the potential of months long storage?
I think this is where, you know, the conversation could really turn into like a 2-day summit, like the one that we're planning in April. So if anybody is interested in these topics, I'd really encourage you to join us there, because I think that's going to be the meat of the conversation.
EEI offices in April, so get on our mailing list and we'll
Get
let you
on
know
the
about
mailing
it.
list. Yeah, thank you. But this is a great foray into that, and I think like we just heard, involvement with the CPUCs is going to be really critical, because if we, or the PUCs, excuse me, I'm from California, so the C just sticks itself in there. But involvement with the Public Utilities Commission is going to be really critical. And the very first thing we have to do is all acknowledge that we want to decarbonize, because if we're not behind that goal of decarbonization, none of this really matters. So if we are going to go down the road of decarbonization, and it's wonderful that we've set this target of 2050, the very first thing we need to do is start with very high fidelity modeling of how we get to the resource mix that we have on the grid today, to the resource mix that we want to have on the grid to 2050, and start building out that glide path. And what that glide path is inevitably going to include is an extreme amount of renewable resources to actually generate the energy, megawatt hours, that we're going to need to consume as a country. And then once we've got, sufficient penetration of those renewable resources, we're going to think about the optimal way to build storage resources of different durations, durations including the 2 and the 4 hour solutions, but also the 8, the 10, the 20 hour solutions, and then definitely the 100 hour, the 200 hour solutions. All the modeling today shows that those resources are certainly needed in that fully decarbonized, 100% greenhouse gas neutral scenario. So once we're starting to develop that glide path, then we need to have those hard conversations with the PUCs to think about how they're going to implement these rules at a state level. This probably includes thinking about some challenging questions like resource adequacy markets. Today, resource adequacy markets were set up 20 years ago. They're set up to meet 1 peak hour over an 8,760 hour year. They don't really work very well with renewable resources. We're already seeing them break down when you've got high penetrations of wind, high penetrations of solar, and they don't work at all when you include storage resources. So there's the spoiler alert there. So thinking about resource adequacy reform, unfortunately, resource adequacy is also one of the main ways that all resources, including storage resources on the grid today, get compensation. So when you start to think about how we finance these things, which is a really critical question for almost all of the LDES members, they say, gee, how do I know what my market revenues are going to be 20 years from now? How do I know what my resource adequacy revenues are going to be 20 years from now? And if we don't have answers about what the resource adequacy market even looks like, which I would suggest it probably doesn't look like what we've got today, these questions are very hard to answer. I think we've got some ideas about that, but I'd like to challenge everybody in this MOU and certainly work with the DOE, work with the PUCs to start thinking about these hard questions. The other thing, and I hate to just pile this on, but energy markets too. They were set up to operate a grid with the resource mix that we have today, coal-fired generation, natural gas-fired generation. They're thinking about what the marginal cost to generate for any of those resources is, and optimally, economically paying those resources, all the resources on the grid that are operating those prices. For storage resources, guess what? That paradigm doesn't really hold true. It doesn't matter what the instantaneous price is for a storage resource. What storage resources really care about is the cost to buy energy and the cost to sell energy, and really that differential. So we probably need an entirely different market product to start compensating storage resources that are participating in the energy market, which is also a whole lot of work. And then you start thinking about bringing in like ISOs, RTOs, grid operators. So now you've really got a lot of people, a lot of players in the room, and a lot of really meaty issues around markets that have been functioning pretty well for the last 20 years.
And I'm going to go to Katie in just a second, but just to build on that, I think at that LDES summit that we're going to have in April, that's exactly one of the things we want to do is bring together those players, put them in a room, look at those barriers, identify them, and see if we can identify solutions and start to move towards them. You've talked a lot about some of the policy impediments. And Katie, I just want to jump to you and EPRI's work. What are you seeing as some of the technological kind of holdbacks on LDES and what we need to do there?
Sure. So one thing that's very excited, right? The huge scale and all the investments that's going into it. We have 150 different flavors we're looking at. That's fantastic, right? But that means the number of use cases are enormous. So tackling just the scale of that and the many dimensions of that. Some of the technical issues that I'll hit, and I'll categorize them according to how we have them in the vision. So with reliability, we have operational project experience. It's small but growing. Operational data availability, uniformity, and accuracy are difficult to grasp due to the many manufacturers, technologies, system sizes, and applications. So how do we test so many different kinds, conditions, and systems? Then there's the economics. Costs are decreasing and operational value is better defined, but additional technical valuation and study on valuation and cost projections is needed to inform decision makers. From an environmental standpoint, the potential to enable increased renewable energy use is understood, but issues in battery materials and recycling remains uncertain. So innovation, rapid technology acceleration needs more education and experience, and you touched on that. And then safety. So there's limited guidance on fire risks, prevention, operations, and maintenance during energy storage life cycle. So thermal runaway data and modeling gaps, sorry, I'm geeking out a little bit, and standards and codes are areas that we're looking at. So as an engineer, I know I'm listing a lot of challenges, but I think if we're able to define the problem, then together we're able to solve it moving forward.
So just to come back real quickly, so a lot of folks think, oh, batteries, that's lithium ion and that's going to be the future. But I know when you get into it, people are like, well, that may not be really the answer for some of the longer duration storage, the weeks or months long. Just wonder if you could comment on that just a little bit.
Sure, yes. Yeah, that seems to be like batteries is what comes to mind, but then there's pumped hydro and then there's also the concrete solutions and some of the ones that you were speaking to. So I think that, again, there's, as at EPRI, we say optionality is not optional because we need to take a look and evaluate all these potential solutions because we are not sure which ones are going to be right depending on the infrastructure, demand, and geography that the energy system will need moving forward.
I appreciate that, and believe me, if any of you want to jump in, feel free. But Brian, I want to pivot to you and maybe looking forward a little bit. We've heard some teasers about this big summit event going on next year. Can you tell us a little bit more about the partnership and some of the activities that we're envisioning for next year?
Yeah, well, I mentioned before, we clearly that's part of our MOU was to really convene policymakers around this, commissions, as you talked about. I think that we've got to have our companies there as well, our research partners, surely, technology developers for sure. But one of the things that I think that we need to think about, and we are thinking about this, is what are the legal, regulatory, and policy things that we really need to be thinking about. And something that hasn't really been mentioned today, Gabe, you alluded to it, but it was really around what we're thinking about some of the barriers and challenges. When we think about, supply chain is top of mind right now for everyone. So when we think about rare earth metals and, issues like that going forward, it is going to be an impediment to get to, that 8, 10, 100 hour storage that we want to achieve. So that's really going to be the purpose of the convening in April, is bringing everyone together. And again, I'll invite you all, if you fall into those categories, to join us, because I think it's really going to be critical for us to come together and problem solve. And we certainly plan on bringing some of the IET findings that McKinsey is surfacing for us, as well as the liftoff documents that we want to have discussed there as well.
Well, and given the importance of all stakeholders, I think you just invited everybody, right, to that. So I hope all of you can join us. So Massimo Leon, I want to pull you back in on this and ask you, just kind of circling back to heat storage in your area. We've talked a lot about batteries and some of these things, but you don't hear maybe as much about heat storage. So just wondered if you could talk a little bit more about the role that it can play and why it's so important in the long duration energy storage area.
Absolutely. Well, 60% of the consumption of energy is about heat in the industrial space. So typically everybody is thinking about electricity, but if you want to phase out gradually oil and gas, you need to find another way to produce this heat. And as we were mentioning in the first round, electricity is becoming the real green source to produce steam. Of course, I'm not talking about hydrogen. That's, in my opinion, a more long-term play. The green hydrogen, of course. But in the medium term, we need to decarbonize. Otherwise, all the objectives that we have in the world to 2030, 2040, 2050 will be just announcements. So technologies are ready. And our technology has a technology readiness level of 8. So we are going to commercialize the technology starting from, let's say, the end of 2024. This will serve across the world because, the industrial space is everywhere. We don't have supply chain constraints because our equipment is done by sand that is available everywhere, steel, and some basic electronic equipment. So that's also important because if you are relying on, say, geopolitical strategic frameworks, it can take a while to get into a industrialized supply chain and be able to scale up. Luckily, in our case, we have a technology. It's a very simple technology and is very, let's say, reliable. So hopefully this will be to scale up quickly in the, let's say, by the end of 2030. And of course, there will be concurrent technologies. This is good because we'll put the cost curve down. We need to complement with electricity in terms of solving the grid resilience challenge, which is probably the most, let's say, relevant headache of grid operators. I used to work 20 years in the, let's say, utility space in Italy. I was asking to my engineers that were managing grids, so, okay, there are some photovoltaic panels in residential. Okay, that we could manage. But what if you build 100 megawatt just 5 kilometers away? No, just don't mention it. I don't want to hear about it. So engineers that are typically very, very good in, let's say, facing and coping with challenges, they didn't want. So I think that the resilience of grid is the real challenge to integrate renewables. And it's not only about lithium-ion. Lithium-ion has some specific role for the microseconds management of the grids and for 2-4 hours storage of electricity or power. These complementary solutions for storage will for sure create a portfolio of opportunities for technology providers, utilities, of course, and for the market, most of all.
Well, I'm going to imagine, and no offense to the engineers on the panel, that I'm sure if you told them you were going to help solve the climate issue by sand, they probably looked at you quite strangely, and certainly appropriate to bring the role of sand up here while we're in this area of the world. So I want to go back. We've talked about the challenges, and we don't want this to be a doom and gloom panel. We heard inspiring remarks from Julie at the beginning about the role the federal government can play in the important role of long-duration storage. So I'm just wanted to come back to all of the panelists. Maybe we'll start with Gabe and work our way down and come back to Massimiliano. If each of you could talk a little bit about some of the most promising developments with long-duration energy storage. And we've heard about the hurdles, but what about some of the sunshine and the rays of opportunity out there? We'll start with you, Gabe, and work our way down.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of reasons to be happy. The Long Duration Energy Storage Council put out a report about a month ago, and it's on industrial decarbonization. One of the things the report highlights is that off-grid applications where you're typically using and burning diesel fuel are more expensive than completely retrofitting those and turning them into 100% greenhouse gas free operations. So things like mining applications, way off grid, where you're spending a lot of money to truck diesel out there, completely retrofitting all of your mining materials and your mining vehicles, and developing solar plus wind plus storage is actually less expensive on a net present value basis than paying for that diesel and paying potential cost for emissions, things like that. So the economics is already out there for some of these applications. The report also goes into some details about the economics of on-grid applications. So some of the heat applications like chemical developments, food and beverage manufacturing, those low heat applications, we did find that the thermal storage is also economic. So if you're able to get access to wholesale power prices, which is an issue that we need to deal with too. But if you do get access to those wholesale power prices, the cost to develop thermal storage is on a net present value basis is less than buying energy 24/7 and using that in your processes. So really positive news there. Gee, if you've got these economic signals already out there, all we need is the technology to fill in the holes, and people are going to buy it. The same thing is going to be true once we get, electric to electric applications for the grid down to those costs. Once those costs are favorable, you don't need to have like IRP type incentives that are saying, hey, you need X amount of duration of resources to balance your grid. They're already going to be built because it's economic. So lots of work to do, but there is really a silver lining, and these technologies are developing very rapidly. Every day I hear new news, and like the TRL information, how far along are you in terms of development? Oh, we're farther than we thought, farther than the last time I chatted. And these guys are really moving quickly, frankly, more quickly than like lithium ion did 10, 15 years ago, because I think we all know how great the need is. Oh, you got one.
So I think I'm going to build off of that whole idea of going forward more quickly than we imagine. And so I think an area that's really accelerating progress is the area of data analytics and AI. And I know it's getting a lot of hype, but if we really think about accelerating the learning, that is a key area in which we need to move forward. So I think of the calculator. So doing math in your head, how long did that take? That was a huge leap. And then we went from the calculator to the computer. So that process, but now we've got processing power that is just off the chart. But you can't just have that. You need data and experience. So we're gaining on that now. We were getting the data, we're getting the experience, we're building the algorithms. And the national labs are a key partner for us because you can't just do this on your own. You have to validate it. And you also need to maybe borrow some of their fancy infrastructure in order to help you out with that. So I think data analytics and AI, that's my bright spot of progress.
Julie, I hope you can help us out with that. Brian?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier the LDES demonstration projects and the awards that DOE put out. I think DOE was really, I think their approach was really brilliant as far as some of the different innovative technologies that are out there. I mean, we have Excel Energy's 100-hour iron air storage project. We have Southern Company's smart recycled EV battery project, and we have Allied Energy's CO2-based energy storage project, and then, of course, NextEra, which has gotten a lot of attention, their bromide zinc storage project as well. So what we're going to do, and that's what we do as an industry, is, as I said, look to learn from what they're learning from the experience of demonstrating, and so that way we can replicate this a lot faster.
Massimiliano, how about yourself? What do you see as some of the most promising developments with LDES?
I'm a strong believer into the power of networking. So partnership will bring an acceleration. I mean, we all know about this artificial intelligence wave. If we apply, for instance, artificial intelligence into the grid management, this will allow storage to be much more effective and be able to reduce the risk of failures, the risk of blackouts, and the tension on, let's say, on the grids. So I'm a strong believer in the application of artificial intelligence into the energy management system, so into the storage as well.
Great, well, thank you. And I know we're getting close. I want to see if the audience has any questions before we have to wrap this up, and just want to give folks a chance. So any questions? David? We got a microphone coming real quick.
We may have more microphones than people. I'm curious, David Victor from UC San Diego, also on the EPRI Advisory Council. I'm curious as to how we should think about uncertainty. It's hard to optimize a system when we don't know all the parameters, and so there are some technologies we know about, LDES technologies we know a lot about today. There are others that are wackadoodle crazy. Most of them will die, some won't. We don't know which. And I'm just wondering whether we have the balance between the known and the unknown right. What do you think about that?
Panelists, anybody want to jump in?
Well, one thing I would say about that, David, and I think that I met you at the EPRI Summer Seminar, and you always think about those things, right? It's like what's around the next corner, and that's really what our convening in April is about too. Is about how can we prepare for the unexpected? What does that look like? What should we consider? And again, a little bit more in the tone of McKinsey's work as well as in that area, looking at things that we wouldn't even consider related to the economics of everything, future cost curves, things like that. But also the issues that we're learning from our companies that we're going to bring to in April. With some of the different things that are actually working that they can plan for. But I totally agree with you. I think in April, we have to have a convening around what we don't know or what's the unexpected. Because you know as well as I do, we'll have commissions across the country if we have some false starts and it's not successful and we're not, that's a very delicate as you know, negotiation with commissions about new technologies. And I see them, I probably shouldn't say this, but I see them slowing down, not speeding up when some of the unexpected things happen. So we've got to prepare for those. So excellent point.
Katie?
Yeah, and I would just add, I'll throw out this term, paced iteration. So I think that we can have a lot of chaos out there, but when we're working with science, you've got to give it time to understand it and really validate it. But at the same time, you can't let that slow you down. We hear that all the time at EPRI. So I think that's what we need to do, have a systematic point of view, but also do it iteration at a pace.
Gabe?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are things you can do to make no regrets decisions today that you know are going to be okay in the future. I think, and some areas of the country are going to be more in that category, where other areas of the country are going to be more, pressing the envelope. So I think we need to think about that a little bit. But it's a very good question, and I think it does get into planning too. Today a lot of planning is based on historical weather patterns. When you start thinking about some of the extreme weather that we've seen in recent years and how that might play a role in grids, so that we're planning a little bit more accurately for what we might expect to come up in the future.
Massimiliano, anything you'd like to add?
Yes, I think to reduce this fog of uncertainties, a good way could be to facilitate the demo plans to be implemented it. So facilitate the financing of these demo plans will demonstrate if a technology is delivering or not. Otherwise, there will be a number of claims that will be just, let's say, creating more noise than facts and evidence.
Well, I've got a whole nother page of questions, but unfortunately, we've been having so much fun up here. We've run out of time for our event. But I just wanted to thank both our keynote speaker and our panelists for really helping us get a sense of the near-term opportunities here with long-duration energy storage, right? We're not talking about something that's 30 years down the road. A lot of it is near-term. We talked about some of the roadblocks that I think can be overcome. They weren't like, well, we haven't solved the technology. These are policy things that can be overcome. We've heard a lot about partnerships, 8 terawatts, 10 months, pace iteration, a lot of great ideas coming out of here. And I just want to ask all of you to join me in thanking our panelists and our keynotes for a great panel. Thanks, everyone.